The longer Ukraine occupies Kursk, the weaker Vladimir Putin becomes. Do you support this idea, this status?
I do. I recognize, though, there's been a trade-off. Again, these are 4 of Ukraine's or more best brigades with, again, logistics, artillery, air defense, engineers, drones, all of the enablers. Took the Russians completely by surprise, which is amazing in an era of ubiquitous surveillance. Penetrated the Russians, exposed them for what they are, which is very incapable when it comes to their territorial defense forces and other local security forces. Showed that the Russian response was almost incoherent. Why would you actually assign the Minister for Emergency Situations in charge of what has to be a military response? And it took them far too long. They are now going after trying to squeeze the Ukrainian area of control to try to eventually perhaps push the Ukrainians out. They've had to increase their forces to do that very substantially. But of course, again, there is a trade-off because these could have been used on the front lines, which are under pressure, particularly, of course, around Kursk. But I'm hopeful, touch wood, that it'll be the Ukrainian drones, again, thousands of them at the enemy every single day. We actually have to think about these suicide drones very differently. Our mindset is that these are weapon systems. They're aircraft. They're not. They should be thought of as ammunition, as a round of sophisticated artillery. And they are being employed as such. It's often observed that, well, there's nobody doing real close air support here. In other words, fighter bombers right on top of the troops bombing the enemy right out there. Number one, it's very complex, but number two, the air defense threat is so significant on both sides that you don't see that here at all, a feature of our previous wars. You do actually have it. It's drones, and they're integrated. They're supporting very, very closely those who are actually on the front lines. And that's their longer range artillery, if you will. That's their close air support and so on. So that's very significant, but we do need to recognize that, again, it has diverted. I think it's worth it. Hundreds and hundreds of Russian soldiers have been captured. Just yesterday, I think it was, the 3rd prisoner swap took place after not many for quite a period of time. There are reportedly thousands of Russians that are still trapped in one pocket, and they can't get away because the bridges over the river that are at their back have all been blown up very skillfully by the Ukrainians. So maybe there's a prospect of even more prisoners. And then the key is, if the Russians eventually put enough pressure, yes, you might have to do a controlled withdrawal, but they will have diverted a very substantial number of Russian forces. They will have given Putin a black eye. He doesn't even want to talk about this. He never addresses this whatsoever. It has exposed the weakness of his forces for all the world to see. But a lot of the judgment of this operation will depend on the ability to stabilize the lines in the southeastern part of the country. And for that, of course, what has to happen is continued U.S. support, and it is continuing very much. I was just with a 3-star brilliant U.S. Army officer who worked for me twice in combat and once before that. The continued EU and individual European country support, maybe most importantly, continued acceleration of the recruiting, training, equipping of Ukrainian soldiers for replacement and also for new organizations. And all of that, that may be the most important factor that will determine the course of the next few months of the war, especially relative to what Russia does.